So we're using this AI music artist to prove out how like this whole ecosystem would work.
But why? Why use an AI music artist and why not use a real artist? There's real money that is being generated that is being diverted away from human artists to these generative AI projects that are soulless, literally soulless. I just don't understand why you would use an AI artist when you have the talent, you have surrounded by talented human artists. Why not just like write the songs yourself or have your producer write the songs and then create a thing like the Gorillas and do like an animated thing that but like the humans are behind.
Yeah.
A real human.
No, I mean I get it.
What's going on? Welcome to the New Music Business. I'm your host, Ari Herstand, author of How to Make It in the New Music Business. The book, third edition, is out now. All formats. You can find ebook, audiobook, physical hard copy, hardcover book, wherever you find books, go pick up the third edition. Today, my guest is Jess Furman. She started as actually a songwriter and artist, but she is an Emmy-nominated creative executive, award-winning music producer, and tech strategist, named Billboard's top 40 industry-shaping executives. She is also the founder of Sound Revolver, a sync house, a sync agency. She's a composer. She's done custom work. And Sound Revolver's credits include Gold certifications, Clio and Tellys awards. And Sound Revolver projects have contributed to Oscar-winning campaigns. She's also served as governor on the LA Chapter Recording Academy. She was a board member of Sona. Her credits are endless. So we actually spend the first half, 60% of this talking all about sync licensing, where sync is at these days, but also something that we haven't talked about much on this show, if you follow this, how composers work, how custom music works for sync. So creating custom music, we talked about like an animated music series. She was hired on to compose for that and write songs for that. How the business around all of that works, around scoring works, around creating custom music and how the royalties work and the upfront fees and all of that, and just how sync has evolved. But then the real juicy part of this is at the end. So I would encourage you, you'll notice this is a little bit longer of an episode than we typically do, and that is because boy, did we open up a can of worms towards the end. It was towards the end, right around that 45-minute, 50-minute mark or so, that we started talking about the hottest topic in the industry right now, AI. And that, but how we got into it is because Jess's next venture is actually creating an AI music artist. And there's been a lot of press around, how Timbaland has done this, and there's a lot of controversy around it. And what AI music is, of course, with the Velvet Sundown and all of these other AI-generated artists. I mean, Deezer straight up came out with a stat that nearly 20% of all music uploaded to Deezer, and Deezer, if you don't know, is just like another Spotify. It's a Spotify competitor, pretty big in France. I said that 20% of the music uploaded to Deezer, which would, you send music to Deezer, you send it to Apple Music and Spotify. So nearly 20% of all music right now that is being distributed to the DSPs is AI generated. That's what their detection services indicated, which is wild and crazy and a little scary, very scary, considering all that money, it's part of a royalty pool and money gets pulled away from, pro rata basis, and it gets actually sent to the AI generated music because we have no guidelines or regulation around AI music right now. Jess has created, she's thinking in this Web3 space using blockchain and how to bring fans into the process, but to start this off with a case study, she's created an AI music artist. And I'll let her talk about it, but I definitely encourage you to stick to the very end of this because it gets real juicy. We spar, and believe me, I push back really, really hard, and props to Jess for sticking with it. Just really, really holding her own, and we get into it. And I have the utmost respect for Jess, and I questioned her quite a lot on like, why is she doing this as an artist, as a human songwriter? Why create an AI-generated artist with AI-generated music and all of that? And she, it's a lot of really excellent points and a lot of stuff that we need to be thinking about as an industry. This is an extremely important conversation. I really appreciate Jess coming on and having this with me. And if you just want to get to the AI juicy stuff and you're like, you know what, I already know about sync, we are putting the chapter markers in there. You can just go to the end of this. It's, like I said, around 45, 50 minutes, something like that. The last 30, 40 minutes of this is that entire conversation conversation. But the whole conversation was really fascinating, and Jess was very generous with her knowledge and wisdom and fees. She was very open about the fees and how much everything is everyone's paid and costs and all of that stuff. So you can find Jess Furman on Instagram. It's just Jess Furman Music, or on LinkedIn. We'll link to her. And you can find all of us that make the show happen at Ari's Take on the socials. Find me at Ari Herstand on Instagram. But the most important thing to do, head over to aristake.com and get on our email list. That's the best way to stay in touch with us. aristake.com, get on the email list. And if you wouldn't mind, just pause this episode, pause it right now, leave us a 5-star review on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. Give us a thumbs up on YouTube. Hit the subscribe button, hit the follow button. However you're listening to this, if you want these episodes to continue to populate your feed, follow, subscribe, all that good stuff. All right, let's kick into the show. Jess Furman, welcome to the show.
Hey, Ari.
Hey.
Thanks for having me.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. So I'm just going to start this off by going just a little trip down memory lane, and then we'll bring it all the way to current day. But I don't know if you remember this. You might remember this, but my very first show in LA ever, before I moved here, was a songwriter round at Room 5, and you were on that round.
What? Oh my gosh, how cool.
We were songwriter buddies
Yes.
on the songwriter round, but it was so long ago, and it was one of these things where I was randomly put on. I was the new kid. The other three knew each other and everything, but yeah. So we
wow.
actually met like way back then, and then, of course, been crossing paths ever since. But yeah, it's.
I love that. I didn't remember it.
You were my very first introduction to LA songwriter music. So
yeah.
Right. Full circle.
Yep.
Anyway, so which is like a nice, segue into like most people in LA and many artists and songwriters and everything, we wear so many different hats and have like zigzagged through this crazy industry of ours in LA. So I'm, before we kind of get into the meat of what we're going to be talking about today, I'd love for you to just kind of give a kind of a brief overview of just kind of a bit of your background and kind of bringing us to present day, and of course touching on the sync world, which is like so many people are so fascinated with, and I know maybe a little update on just kind of where it's all happening and all of that, and then we'll get into everything else.
All right, sounds good. Yeah, so as you mentioned, I started off as a singer-songwriter, playing clubs. I'm from New York. And I moved out to Los Angeles specifically to get more involved in writing for TV and film and for sync licensing. I was live gigging a lot in New York, and I knew all the big studios were out here in Los Angeles, so I decided to move out there. And I don't know, for me, I wanted to have a little more control over my career. I think I got pretty lucky at the front wave of when that acoustic pop thing was popping off. It was Ingrid Michaelson, Miko, Kate Vogel. I got signed to Secret Road when I first got out here. I landed at ASCAP Writers Workshop. And Secret
Road was Ingrid Michaelson, Lynn Grossman,
yes.
Ingrid Michaelson's manager. And then one of the, actually like the first... I think one of the first like standalone independent sync houses, like sync agencies, that was really making it happen with like that whole Grey's Anatomy world, that whole scene, Scrubs, One Tree Hill, that whole era that was really popping off. I guess like 07, 08, 09, 2010.
Yeah, it was the front end of like, there was the singer-songwriter, vibe that was super dramatic. And then there was also the kind of like more like singer-songwriter kind of pop with like the ukulele stuff and kind of quirky.
Right.
But yeah, at the time, like that, they were it. Like Secret Road was the premier, singer-songwriter. If you got rep by them, you were kind of, a lot of doors opened up. So I lucked out and I signed to them kind of towards the beginning. And what ended up shifting for me, which is when I created Sound Revolver, was I was doing the gamut as an artist. I didn't realize I could write for other artists till I got out to LA, and all of a sudden I'm looking around going, oh, wow, I think I'm a little bit more of a writer than I am actually. I want to do the whole artist thing. But also around that time, Secret Road started signing a lot of other singer-songwriters that sounded like me. So, first I'm getting a ton of placements, and then suddenly they have hundreds and hundreds of incredible songwriters, great for supervisors, not so great for you being now in a pool of tons of other artists. So
sure.
I taught myself how to produce and write. I hired like independent friends who were producers to show me how to set up templates. I got books and home recordings for dummies, and I just wanted to have a lot more control. So I built up Sound Revolver kind of from that space. And I just started landing custom gigs for TV, films, commercials, ads. And the other thing for me also was I did do a few stints in like I went through the whole gamut for trying to write for other artists, and I got pretty far with it. Like I had labels flying me around. I would be in rooms with really big artists, and after about a year or so of that, working like 8 jobs just to be able to afford to sit in these studios for free, of course, I had a lot of songs that got put on hold, and my songs ended up in song jail. So for me, the licensing and the producing part was really cool because it's a little less glamorous when a chipmunk sings your song as opposed to maybe, a bigger artist. But, you want
What's song jail? Explain how that works.
Song jail is when you're writing for cuts, which is writing for other artists. So you get a cut on their record, meaning maybe you co-wrote one song if you're, maybe more, maybe the whole album. But, with song jail, it's essentially a lot of these bigger artists, once they have a hit or something comes out, they'll put on hold a lot of the tracks. So maybe they'll, do a gamut for a year and they'll record, 30 plus songs. And then maybe they'll only release 12 of them. And then the rest that aren't being used, depending on the artist, sometimes they don't want to repurpose them for other things because they might want to use them later. So I call that song jail. So
do they pay you for that, or how does that work?
No, you have to be able to support yourself to go into these rooms. Writing for cuts was really, really difficult. I worked like so many jobs to be able to just show up at a studio and relax for 10 hours in a session with an artist. And, you have to build a rapport also with these artists. And I think that's also why a lot of people that do end up doing the cuts game, they sign publishing deals because they need those advances. If they're not sure if those songs are going to end up on a record, they're not sure how long it's going to take for that to be released. So, for me, when I started writing more for TV and film and I started doing the custom side, not just the licensing, because I started off in licensing, my music was getting licensed. What I like about the custom is, again, like, you get a brief, you get hired on a show or for a project, or you bid on something and you get the theme or the series, and it's expected of you. And your songs are going to end up out in the world and not just on someone's hard drive.
Wait, so let's talk about the custom world, because I honestly, I don't think as many people are familiar with the custom world. I think everyone at this point understands what sync licensing is. We've had a ton of sync agents on the show. We've had a bunch of music supervisors on the show. I think everybody understands getting music that they make in a TV show or on an ad. That's pretty straightforward. They get paid an upfront sync fee. Maybe they make some back-end performance royalties, whatever. What is custom music? How does that work?
Yeah, so with sync, you're right. You'll have agents that represent you, and maybe you're riding a trend where your music is on trend for what it would, what the certain shows want. But you're kind of at the mercy of a supervisor needing something for a scene with very specific lyrics. And there are people that write. I call it like writing for sport, where I have a bunch of fake sync aliases for my bands, and there's me or me with other people, and we've licensed a ton of stuff, and we write with sync in mind. So that is technically writing original for sync. But with custom music, the difference is, instead of you creating something, completing the record, and hoping that someone will license it after the fact, with custom music, you're getting hired ahead of time to create it. So, for example, when I did a show for Hasbro, we bid on the themes, meaning that we got these briefs saying, hey, we want a theme song for the show. This is what we want.
Hasbro, the toy company?
Yeah, so Hasbro, it does a lot.
Do they also make gummy bears? No, company is that?
They make My Little Pony, a ton of spin-offs. They have gotcha. So a lot of their brands are actually probably cartoons and things that you watch. And a lot of those series that are music-driven series. So I've written for a lot of animated series. So a lot of those series, if you land typically maybe 1 or 2 songs and you have a good relationship with the producer or with someone supervisor on that project, you'll get the whole season. So, there are a lot of the series that I've worked on, there'll be 2 or 3 songs per episode. And then typically you'll get, so we're custom, you'll get a brief, you'll maybe get the, the actual script, and ahead of time you're writing the songs. And once they're approved, they get animated later. Yeah.
Oh, okay. So animated shows. So that makes sense. So they're like musicals, essentially. You're writing little, right? So they sing songs in the show. The characters are actually singing the songs.
Yeah, that's for animated music, driven series. And then other custom would be, ads, things like that. Score, I would say, is custom because typically, you're working with the director, on a project, and there's no music and you're scoring to picture. So basically the difference between licensing and custom is licensing is something pre-existing that's getting placed somewhere, and custom is, you get a brief and you're working with a team to write bespoke music for that project.
And when you get hired on a show to do custom, whether it's like an animated musical or it's just another show that you're hired on to maybe score it, or is that how does that work? Because like financially, like what's the business arrangement? Are you like on salary and then you're like writing work for hire and you're just submitting songs that they then own?
Mm-hmm.
Or do you make royalties from that? Or are they still licensing every song? They're paying you per song? Or how does that all work?
Yeah, it's a good question. I guess the answer is it depends. The ones that are typically music driven series and it's animated, like if you're doing it for DreamWorks or Disney or Hasbro, Mattel's another one. Those are all
Mm.
buyouts. So typically they'll only make you bid. When I say bid, like they'll go wide on a brief for maybe a whole season or series, and you'll do a demo for them. You don't get paid for those demos, but if they
Mm-hmm.
select you, then you land the contract usually for the whole thing. Sometimes not all the shows operate the same way. So like when we were first getting involved with Hasbro, for example, we were pitching and getting single songs, and then later on down the road they had so much confidence, and I had a writing partner at the time that our team that they would just kind of give us all the songs for that season, which was great, and a lot
And
easier.
do they then like say it's going to be 30 songs at a rate of
Yes.
I'm picking numbers out of my ass. I don't know, $1,000 a song or $10,000. I have no idea. I don't have no ballpark. What is a ballpark for that? Like, how does that work? People are literally, you
Yeah.
could say 500, you could say 50,000. Both sound right to me. I have no idea.
So I will say that probably unsurprisingly, again, it depends. So if it's
Right.
same with like a license, right? So like some artists are going to get huge license fees because they're famous artists. There are
Right.
big films for Hasbro where like they wanted Pasek and Paul, who just did, was it they were coming off of one of their really big musicals they got all the awards for, and their fee
Mm-hmm.
was probably closer to $500,000 a song, versus these animated series where it's anywhere from a couple thousand to 10,000. It used to be in the $20,000 to $30,000 range, but I haven't seen those fees in a really long time.
Mm-hmm.
Typically, I'd say some of it's pretty dismal. It can go from like $1,000, and these are buyouts, to for a theme maybe 10 to 15, maybe if you're lucky 20. But there are other things that you negotiate around that, right? So if they want to attach your name as an artist, that fee goes up. Like those
Mm.
fees are for you producing it maybe under an alias. And again, like I like to say I'm a cash writer, which means I don't have a lot to bargain with publishers, because most of my placements, and I've had hundreds of placements on different shows, most of them, other than licensing, are buyouts. So they're owned by the network, but I get my fees up front, which is really great. So I know going into it what those rates are going to look like.
And so because it's a buyout, you don't have ownership on the song or the recording. Are there any royalties involved in any capacity?
Yeah, so you typically keep your writer's share. And they're
Oh.
supposed to be registering it. Some of the video games, the fees are a lot higher, but they're really terrible at registering because it's just not their financial model. So,
Mm-hmm.
they make their best efforts to register the track, but to them, some of their games are making millions a day. Like they don't really care about, or at least I think if they saw it cumulatively, they would care, but they're not
Sure.
structured to have a publisher register it for them, and they don't have someone in-house that knows how to register tracks. But you are usually entitled to your writer's share, which is something that we usually negotiate, make sure that we get. I
Mm-hmm.
think in bulk, before streaming I did really well with it, but with streaming, you're seeing royalties go down. The streamers
Because
don't.
they release these songs officially to streaming services as
Oh,
like under the
sorry.
soundtrack or something.
When I mean streaming, I mean for streaming, like Netflix.
Oh,
Yeah,
got it. I
those
got it.
streaming.
Video
Yeah,
streaming services.
exactly. Video
Right.
streaming
Okay.
services. So you used to get, and I'm sure you probably covered this with other sync licensing things you've done, but broadcast rates. So if you get a song, either a license or custom for broadcast, the ad rate, it's based off of the ad rate for that thing, right? So if it's primetime TV with high ad rates, or if it's a Super Bowl ad, or it's a song that plays during the Super Bowl, because the ad rates are so high, your royalties are a lot higher. The problem with
Mm-hmm.
these streaming video services like the Netflixes of the world, the Paramounts, is that everything's based off of a subscription rate, and that subscription rate is based off of viewership and when it's viewed. So, if you now only have your writer's share and maybe you've split it between 2 or 3 writers, it's really, you're really hoping to get those fees up front, because, maybe over a course of a couple of years of writing, you'll see something, but not so much. I will say sometimes I have worked on some shows that have got syndicated overseas and they end up broadcast overseas, and I'll see a
Mm.
spike in my royalties, and I'll always go and
Oh
check
wow.
and be like, oh, that's interesting. It's because they actually aired this on television, in another country.
Right, because also the video streaming services are notoriously opaque with their viewership numbers because they're a lot of them, these private companies, they don't. I mean, even if they're public, they're not really sharing the viewership numbers like the broadcast stations are required to do, and so we have that visibility and transparency, which those rates have worked out. It's weird that they haven't been able to work these rates out better that are comparable because it's not like fewer people are watching TV these days. It's just they're watching Netflix instead of CBS, but CBS is still paying a lot better if you get it on broadcast, I think, in terms of performance royalties, right?
Yeah, but and this is what I wonder will change, because we used to watch all these streaming networks with no ads, right? And now you're
Right.
seeing ads crop up. So,
Mm,
technically, if the PROs are going after that, there should be an ad rate calculation in addition to the subscription fee. Because up
right.
until those pre-roll ads or those ads, if you're watching something on Netflix with no commercials, great if you're a fan and want to watch it with no commercials. There's not as much money that's now,
Sure.
being then split up between all the parties. But I mean, it's dismal. I mean, they're really not. There's not much to split up between the creative side altogether, even with filmmakers and people that get royalties on that side. So and then you've probably already covered this as well, but these bundled services also make things a lot worse. So with Spotify bundling music with podcasts, same thing. The
Hmm.
royalties and the rates go down. Or AI music
Hmm.
now filling filling things up.
Right. I mean, we'll get into that. But so how does the bundling work for video streaming services, and how does that affect sync rates or custom rates?
I mean, I think it's if you notice their add-on rates. So, like, if you were to purchase Paramount at some, a certain price plus off the, or Showtime a la carte, versus now you're bundling it with Prime and a few extras, like giving you
Mm,
discounts and deals. Again, like
right.
lack of
You get a
transparency.
Verizon phone bit subscription, they throw in Disney Plus for free or whatever, and Hulu,
Yeah.
and yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And all that
Okay.
money just gets put into a pot, and then,
Mm,
everything gets duked out between who watches what. And then they're also, I think, which is what it probably causes a lack of transparency is, you know, does it count if you watch the first 10 minutes of a show and you don't watch the whole show? Do you have to, as a viewer, watch the whole show for it to enact
mm,
a specific rate? Are they
interesting.
able to track what part of the show that was watched and just, so I think, I do know for standings, I have quite a few friends who are filmmakers that they always say, like, please, please, please watch the entire thing. Like, if you're going to, like, turn it off towards the end, it's really important that whole thing is tracked. Otherwise, their ranking goes down. That doesn't count as a viewership.
Wild.
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah.
Interesting. So back to kind of the custom music, like if you get brought on now, is it different if you're brought on to score a show as like the composer versus brought on? Because have you done that also?
Yeah.
Like been the composer on a show versus like, yeah, writing songs for a musical?
Yeah, it's pretty church and state. And I guess so I haven't written any musicals. What I've written is they're music
Or
driven
animated?
series. Yeah, and the difference
Yeah.
is, again, it's very
What's the
nuanced.
difference?
So the
Yeah.
difference would be musical is a whole thing. Like musical theater usually, there's like the book and the lyrics and the music, but the music and the underscore for that kind of ties into the entire experience. Whereas
Okay.
music driven series that I've worked on, like Trolls, Alvin and Chipmunks, a lot of the spin-offs of My Little Ponies, Equestria Girls, Pony Life, shows like that. They're regular series, and then they break into song at some point. So I'm usually writing pop songs for the animals,
Okay.
which is so
Okay.
they're
Got
full.
it.
Yeah, they're full on songs typically.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
and so there is a separation of church and state. And when I did actually land as a lead composer for a series called Pony Life, which is a part of the My Little Pony brand, I bid
Okay.
separately. I bid separately on the theme song, which was a pop song, which I co-wrote with another producer, and then the songs that were in the episodes. They allowed me because usually you're pop and it's like church and state, but I got the opportunity to bid on the composer side, and I did land
Mm.
as a composer. But in their mind, they typically have composers over here and songwriters over here.
And then how do you tell me how the rates work for composing? Do you get paid per episode or a flat rate for the whole series, or is there not like like a number of minutes of music, or how does that work?
Yeah, so these we were paid like half up front, half when we delivered for the entire season. So I had like a junior composer work with me that helped with the music editing, and kind of rejiggering some of the cues, and then I would assign some cues to him that like I'm not great with jazz, so he would do the jazz cues. There wasn't a lot of jazz; it was mostly pop. But we ended up negotiating a season deal, and then you can break it down so you know how much per episode. But they do the whole like order ahead of time, so you know how many episodes you're getting. And so you know what it breaks down. And that's the other part too, is you're also like trying to think of how long it takes you to do this, because the pay's not great. So you're basically like trying to figure out like, how do I really just make this a streamlined process so the episodes come in, I'm hitting the notes, because the more time it takes you, it's diminishing returns at that point. It's a flat rate.
Yeah, for real. And for the for like the theme songs or the custom songs that were buyouts for these animated, what did you call it? Not musicals, and
animated music-driven series.
Animated music-driven series. Okay,
yes.
Learning new terms.
Yep.
All right, so for those shows, did you make SAG royalties if you were the singer on these songs?
So it depends on if it was a SAG production or not. A lot of the animated TV series versions of them are not SAG. Some are, but a lot of them aren't, unfortunately.
Interesting.
But yes, you would. So there's cases where the singer makes a lot more than the person writing or even writing the music.
Right.
Yeah.
It can be a lot. I mean, a friend of mine, she was did just sang the theme song. Didn't write it, just was brought in as a singer, sang a theme song for a children's show. Actually, it was on Apple TV, and just like. And she was singing in like a kid's voice. You could barely even tell it was her and whatever. And then like, a year later, she gets a check for like $12,000 or something just in SAG. SAG,
yes.
She's not even a member of SAG. And they just like, sent the thing because it was a SAG production.
Yes.
And she was the vocalist. It was paid almost like you're an actor, but like, you're paid because she was the vocalist on it, which is essentially treated the same way as an actor.
Yeah, that's like, I mean, I have like a bone of contention for this, because with this, especially having written on a lot of music-driven series, you're driving story, right? So there's people who are protected with the WGA that write scripts, and they're on union rates with great royalties, but the songwriter is not protected. So the minute someone's singing it, suddenly, I wrote a song instead of writing flat dialogue, and now I don't have union WGA rates. So
you got to sing on that. You got to then you can participate
you have to hum in the background
union, right?
and
yeah, just
something.
Put your voice on and some with it, right?
Yeah.
Crazy. Interesting. Well, so right, you get into this custom work. And super fascinating, and so tell me where, like, because you referenced Sound Revolver, but break that down. Like, when did you start that, and what was the focus of that, and I guess what is it now, and how has it evolved?
Yeah, so coming off of my deal with Secret Road, I was starting to do more custom work, and I was finding it really hard to get hired because of my name. People would Google me, and they'd say, okay, when I want a cute singer-songwriter track, or I want someone playing a ukulele, I'll hire you. But they weren't willing to give me a chance to do anything else. So I picked a masculine name for a company, Sound Revolver. I took my name off all the credits. to this day, when you email me, it's JD it's always JD. I don't have, I'll sign Jess, but like, and I'd like to say that it's back then and it's not like that anymore, but it took me a while to build a brand that was, gender neutral, maybe even more masculine leaning. And I started bidding out a bunch of projects, and instead of saying I did it, I said we, and I built it up from there. And then the other thing that I found that I was really good at, just from my days as a singer-songwriter and touring and playing in bands, was I had a huge Rolodex of people who I knew would come off the road, and I built Sound Revolver around custom in a way that's super authentic. So if someone's like, hey, I want this to sound like, Joe Purdy, or, they'd pick an artist, chances are I knew who toured with them. And so I'd call my buddy who's back on, and writes, and I'd bring them in. And in the beginning, there was a lot more hand-holding. Like I would co-produce stuff with them. And then a lot of my friends who ended up coming off the road were working on records anyway. So most of the coaching I would have to do is getting them to work to notes, because they were used to working with artists, and it was a hang. And so, they'd get a note and be like, that's stupid, I'm not putting claps there. And I'm like, you kind of have to, it's Ralph Lauren and they want claps, and they'd be like, this is a terrible idea. I'm like, I know it is a terrible idea, but the client wants claps, right? After the first chorus. So that's Sound Revolver came out of that, essentially, was me just getting too much work or realizing that I wouldn't take a swing at something I knew I wasn't really good at. And I had other friends who were great. And so no one ghosted for me, but I built all of Sound Revolver around just like my Rolodex of really talented people and hiring them. And then, getting more and more clients that way, and also overseeing the projects and creative directing a lot of the projects just to make sure that they got over the finish line. So, over the years, most of the things that my name is on is because my wheelhouse, and my company's name is on a lot of stuff that we'd hire other producers and artists, and it was just really, really fun.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
You said no one ghosted for you. What does ghosted mean?
So a lot of people that have custom houses or production houses, they have ghosting essentially means that you'll see someone's name on it, but they did not, like, they take full credit or 90% of credit. Maybe they'll minorly credit the person that actually wrote it. And a lot of jingle houses do that. A lot of times they'll have younger producers or writers. I can't name names, but there's a few huge, I've been offered some stuff where I've walked away from deals because we didn't realize that I had so much work coming in that I didn't have to have that composer take all the credit for a bid that I did 100% of. So, but that's not necessarily the case. So, ghosting is the same as like ghostwriting for a book. There are a lot of these houses where, it's a prominent, especially the ones that, if you see like production houses that are built around specific talent. So like you'll notice, go to Sound Revolver, like, yes, it says I'm on the team, but I don't tout myself as the main talent. A lot of the ones that tout themselves as the main talent, there is a lot of ghosting happening behind the scenes where, they can't keep up with the work. And it's that pay it forward model where, they're going to give you an opportunity, but take credit and put their name all over it, and that's just something that's never felt really good to me. Or I've been on the other end of it, and I'm like, I'm not interested in doing that.
Like they have staff writers that are kind of composing in the style of or something, and so like, I don't know, I'm just throwing this out. So like Hans Zimmer or something is a name that everybody knows and has a gazillion credits, and like is brought in, hired for that. But maybe if he's takes on a bunch of projects and doesn't have the time or doesn't want to do it or whatever, theoretically could have a staff that would compose in the style of, and then he'll look it over or something. And that's essentially what ghost writing would be. And then you'd still see like music by Hans Zimmer, but maybe he didn't actually touch it. And again, it's just an example.
Yes. And Hans Zimmer is a great example of like, yes, he has a huge name, and it's helped. Like, and you have seen him in some of his major films. Like he'll pick another, like Lisa Gerrard or someone else. Like he usually has a favorite that he's done the music with. So he does raise up composers. He does have a factory, for sure.
Right.
I think some of the worst offenders though are the ones that, like, there have been a couple that I've been invited to write for where when I've gotten the contract, it would say their name and writers, and I'm like, we weren't even in a room together. This wasn't evocative of your style. Like I was literally handed a brief and I did it, and you were like, all of a sudden contract comes, and I'm like, why is this person's name on this? It's not. I've never even had an email. You didn't even pretend to be CC'd on it. It's
almost like when superstar artists demand publishing when they had nothing to do with writing the song, and that happens all the time too. They pop their name in as a co-writer even though they literally didn't change a word. But yeah. Wild. So, okay, well, that's fascinating. I want to ask you this, but I understand this could then take the rest of the conversation. But you alluded to it, why you made it gender neutral or more masculine leaning. Were you noticing at that time that as a woman, like you weren't getting opportunities or taken seriously, or was that noticeable in the industry as it was in like either the film side or the composing side or all of that?
Yeah, I would say all of it. Like I remember I had an assistant, very junior, come to a couple of events with me, and he was funny because he was such a supporter of women, but he would always make a comment where like we'd walk into a networking event and be mostly men, and I would go to like different studio events or things that were not as music focused as like film industry or advertising especially focused, and they would talk to him the whole time, and then they'd be, oh yeah, we should, and I interject a little bit, and then they'd say to him, we should set up a meeting, and he used to love to just laugh and point and say, she owns the company, you want the meeting with her, and he would let them kind of hang themselves a little bit, and so I've also had instances where like I used to have bigger studios, where we had like live rooms and things like that, and clients would book it and come in, and they'd ask me if I was the office manager, and I'd be like, no, this is my office, this is my studio. And, we'd get inside and they'd be like, but those aren't your guitars, right? Like they couldn't fathom, to have like all my, I toured as a guitar player, and they would just look and be like, but whose guitars are those? And you could just see them trying to work it out like this. So I don't, again, I think like, a lot of the advocacy work that I've done over the years, which, like with Sona is about songwriter rights, but also a lot for visibility of, women and non-binary in the space. And, I did, a couple of friends and I, of us I was an LA chapter governor for the Grammys recently, and we launched something called Women in the Mix. And the goal was basically just to show that women are, have all different roles in music. They're not just a singer or an artist, and you walk in, I can't tell how many times someone would be like, oh, are you the singer? Which, I would rather be called a musician than a singer. Not that a singer isn't a musician, but there's a bit more of a multi-hyphenate, behind it. And there is a lot of stigma around like, people just going, wait, but you actually play the guitar. You actually play it. So it still exists. Maybe a little less, I'd like to think. Like, I'd like to think we've made a dent, but who knows?
Working on it.
Yep.
I guess. Yeah, interesting. So where is the industry at now, would you say? I mean, as someone has seen this, you kind of caught the very front end of this, like, this explosion in sync licensing and the fragmentation, because prior to the mid 2000s or so, I credit like Alexandra Petsavas, like with the OC initially, and then with Grey's Anatomy, of course, is just kind of like actually for the first time putting independent music into TV shows and film and stuff like that, and had the Twilight series and all of that. But it was like, and then that exploded. And then it was just so many indie artists all over TV. It was like the hip, cool thing to do, all these music supervisors, then sync agencies popping off.
Yep.
But you kind of saw that like rise, because you caught it right at the beginning of all of that happening. Because historically, it was really publishing companies and labels that were controlling all of that. And then supervisors only went to the pretty much mostly major labels and major publishers to find music for their shows and their spots and ads and all of that. Now, fast forward, 20 years or so, just about. Where do you say the industry's at now? I mean, I've lost track of how many independent sync agencies there are. Literally dozens and dozens of sync agencies.
Yes.
There seems to be more TV now than ever. It seems to be music all over these shows. But like in terms of just the sync fees and the rates and the opportunities and all of that, where do you see where we're at now?
Yeah, I mean, I think that again, it's a bit dismal in terms of, I think if you want to just be a sync artist at this stage, and you're right, like it has been that whole giant wave, and I was at the forefront of when I was getting $30,000 to $40,000 for a placement, which was a lot of money for an unsigned
for
indie
a TV
artist.
Show or
a theme, or like I had a theme that was like 30 something. I had like Secret Road got me some really great stuff, but within a year those fees dropped to 10, then 8, then 3 or 4, and it wasn't that and agents started taking bigger cuts. So back then agents would take 12 to 14%. Now they take 30 to 50. And, it's because they kind of have to. The fees are, it's a lot of pitching. The fees have gone down. The big thing that shifted back then was initially it really wasn't cool for major label artists to do TV shows and ads. They didn't really want to do it. And, you have the rise of streaming, Kazaa and Napster and all of that. And then you have the Spotify's pop off, and suddenly income streams just aren't there. People aren't buying records, right? So all of a sudden the sync licensing thing looks really attractive. And I think you're right, like the cool first wave of the OG music supervisors that were discovering artists, it did become this holy grail enough that I think artists that are with the major labels and the publishers all of a sudden were looking and going, okay, now it's cool to have our music on this TV show. It's not selling out. It used to be selling out. So I think that was that first wave. In the last, I think, just like I kind of shifted into custom, the last couple of years I've gotten more into, looking into what are alternative income streams. How do we utilize new technology to do that as a writer and as an artist? I've seen firsthand I know there's more opportunities for content, and that was a really cool thing about 5 or 6 years ago. Like there was a huge boom. And I think that's why maybe closer to 6 to 10 years, you started seeing a lot of sync agencies popping up, because all of a sudden you have all of these shows coming out everywhere. You have people creating more content. They need more music to go with that. The problem is at this stage, it's easier to make, just like it's easier to home record, it's easier to make content, visual content. And now with AI, it's easier to create and generate music without having it be even real artists. So I think music's not going to go away. The desire for music's not going to go away. But what's going to happen is that marquee artists are always going to get that placement. If you are an indie artist and someone is in love with your music and they're a producer or a director or maybe a supervisor, there's always going to be a place for you. But the heyday that we've had over the last decade is going to be gone, because a lot of the source music, a lot of the music that aren't, the Grey's Anatomy that you're talking about is like the end scene, right? It's called a visual vocal. So that's the holy grail of a license, because most licenses are actually your music playing from what's called source, which would be there's a radio and it's turned down really low in the background, or it's only on the screen for 2 seconds and someone's talking over it, right? And those placements used to be good for 10 to 15,000, and then the last couple of years it's maybe $5,000, $3,000, and there was still some shows about like 3 or 4 years ago where like I was getting $5,000 a pop for licenses that I was getting, and I'd watch the placement and I'd have to turn the TV all the way up because it would be, playing in the background. I'm like, that's how much they paid for that little thing. Like, that's ridiculous. Whereas the Holy Grail would be like the end sequence montage of Grey's Anatomy, where your lyrics, visual vocal, your voice is up. There isn't really dialogue over it. It's like a very prominent marquee placement. And those were really good for, I think, artists for driving visibility. But now, like most of the music that is sourced, you're not going to pay that amount to have something playing on the radio in the background. They're going to use AI for that background source music. So
wait, but that's I think where everyone was worried is that AI was going to come into this mix. But I thought that like through the strike negotiations and all of that, SAG, and then the Writers Guild, and then AFM, which is supposedly the musicians union that no one I know is in, but I thought negotiated something. Wasn't there something where they're not allowed to use AI music in film and TV, or that's not a thing that anyone can?
It's actually the reverse now, because now AI music is eligible for, and AI productions are eligible for Oscars, Grammys. Now, the degree to which there's a human element, there has to at least be a basic human element, which could be something as simple as you beatboxed over it, maybe you sang, maybe you added bass to it. There has to be a human element to it. But they've the awards shows have loosened the requirements in terms of what you can and can't use. And like what I noticed too is a lot of the libraries. So the big shift with the network. So I've done a lot of work with like Viacom was a big client for me, and Viacom Networks has like Logo, CMT, MTV, like just tons of TV show networks, right? It's a big kind of conglomerate. And I've done a lot of like big batch orders for them for custom, where they'll order different tracks and songs and things like that. They, top of this year, I called them up. We usually get pretty decent orders from them. And they were like, our budgets have all been slashed. They've been creating their own libraries for years. And if they own the master in the pub, I don't know for a fact, but I would guess they are probably using AI generators because they own a lot of the copyrights. Now, I don't know how they're going to get around paying the writer's share, because theoretically, even if they're remixing something, it's a song that, I'm still entitled to all my writer's share on the songs that maybe they own the master and the publishing for. But if they own all their own music and they're using AI generators to recreate, again, source music, then it's not. I don't see that as not unreasonable, but I don't see it as an unlikely occurrence. They've already,
do you know this is actually, because this is the first time literally that I've heard that show. I've assumed that this might happen, but I thought there were some kind of protections in there or something. This is the first time I'm hearing that TV shows they're using AI generated music for the syncs and like on the TV shows or movies or ads.
I mean, I don't think they're going to advertise it so much, because they're going to focus and lean in on the marquee artists. That's what I mean. Like, there'll still be a prominent placement at the end of a Grey's Anatomy type show where the artist pops up. Like, there's a benefit to creativity, promoting other creatives. So it's not going to go away entirely, but again, if it's source music and it's on the radio and it's in the background and it's something else and they're cutting corners, you also have to think about it where it's like if a supervisor has a set budget for the entire episode or season, and the director maybe has their, heart set on some expensive music, like that's why they're negotiating, because they're trying to figure out how to pay people as little as possible given their budget, right? Given maybe specific needs that they know they're going to have to spend a lot more for that bigger artist, and now they only have this left over, right? And so it usually goes like the negotiations go down from there. It's like, what do I have to spend? Can I even afford that track? And sometimes the answer is no, that they can't whack that track into something that they can afford. But the step below that would be indie artists and writers, right? Who have fees that tend to be lower. And then the bottom below that is libraries, right? If they're like, okay, well, now we ran out of music, but our production house or our network has a library deal with, Massive, or with like, Killer Tracks.
Extreme,
right? And then we'll pull from that. So
can you break down what a library is for people that aren't familiar?
Yeah, so libraries are, and some networks, because I mentioned Viacom now has their in-house library, but basically what music libraries do is they play kind of like a volume game where they own all of the publishing and the masters. So, a lot of times it is a way that you can get hired to write, or you can get paid to create compositions for a music library. But basically a library is going to house a whole, think thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of tracks. They just sign tons of content, and they either have it created or they sign it, but they own it. So that when a network comes and does a deal, they're not really having to negotiate single song licenses. They usually pay a fee to use the library. And sometimes if they want a single song and they don't want to have pay for typically what they'll say is, okay, it's X amount if it's a TV series. So a lot of reality shows use only library music for the most part. And what they'll do is they'll say, okay, we have a deal with, Extreme Music, and we're allowed to pull X amount of songs for X amount of period of time, and it's a flat rate. And then the way that each of these libraries compensate their creatives, it just depends on the deal. Some of them, the composers are happy to get, or the songwriters are happy to get their back end because they know that it's going to air. Some of them do more of a profit sharing model where if it did get selected, they get a bump on their statement, they can track the usages, and they'll give them a little bump for it being selected. And maybe they'll give them a cut of what that license fee was for the entire library, but it really depends. So tricky.
Yeah, so they're not doing upfront sync fees per track necessarily like they normally do for sync licenses from sync agents or sync houses. They're doing just for example purposes, we'll pay you $10,000 to have access to your entire library, and we can license up to 50 tracks or 100 tracks this year or something like that, or unlimited tracks, I guess, or whatever it is.
Exactly. And I would say music editors don't mind it because they're moving so fast with a lot of the reality stuff, but a lot of times they do get sick of it, which is how you still get some licenses sometimes, because they're the best tracks go to the top, so you have people that keep recutting the same things into their space, or they just get sick of what's in that library. So I will say, really important for your listeners, I'm a huge proponent of no money exchanging hands, no copyright. And there are a lot of libraries that, for the privilege of submitting your music, they co-own your copyright. And I understand that it's attractive, you get excited, you get attention, you're like, wow, they really like my track, it's just being added to this library. But if they're not paying you, they should not own your copyright. Now, if they want to represent it for a period, they're like, hey, we need to have it exclusively for a term, but it reverts back to you. That's fine if you're willing to do that. If there's a conversion clause, I've negotiated some deals when I was on the creative side of those deals where it would go co-pub only if they got me a minimum amount for that track. Meaning in my mind, okay, now you've earned me 1,000 or 1,500 or 2,000 or maybe more, and now you co-own, that track. And there are some sync licensing agents that do that too, they make grabs on co-pub, right? But no money, no copyright. Just
no, that's a great point.
And blazing it on a t-shirt,
No, I love that. No, that's a great point, because, and just to clarify, I've seen sync agencies that they will participate. They'll do a co-pub deal. They'll essentially co-own the publishing, the song, if they send you a brief and you're writing to the brief, that they're essentially facilitating this composition that you're creating because they've sent you the inspiration for it, and that's their justification. But it really only comes into effect if it gets placed, and if then they, actually get the license fee from that. But what you're saying is that there are some libraries, any song that you submit to them with the hopes of getting placed, they will also want to own the copyright of that. They'll own the master. They'll own the publishing.
Yeah, they'll just say thank you, assign you to
Wild.
a deal, and like you remember, like you deal with a lot of independent artists that, or maybe artists they don't know the songwriting world so much or the publishing world, and there's a lot of excitement around someone finally giving you a yes, right? So there are a lot
Right, of
of these
course.
like companies that take advantage of that yes, and
Yeah.
they are like, or like again, I think they've convinced themselves, like I have been on the other end of people handing me briefs and saying, well, I co-created this with you because I forwarded you a piece of paper. And I will say I have negotiated very hard against some people that I really love, I will not name. And I've just been like, no, because you don't pay the rent in my studio and you're asking me for free to work on a track that might end up nowhere. And you've also handed this to God knows how many other people. So,
Right.
It's my risk and my exposure. Like it's not, you didn't co-create it. Now, if again, I'll do a threshold, if you land it, and it's at X amount and you want to co-pub it, fine. I'm not happy about it, but that's my middle ground. But yeah, the I forwarded you a brief and now I'm a co-creator is like horrible.
That's wild. So I want to kind of shift to a more positive, optimistic note. I'm curious where you're seeing this heading. Like, what are the opportunities? Maybe the opportunities for emerging artists in this day and age. Like, where do you see this industry heading? Where do you see that artists can thrive and succeed?
Yeah, I mean, I think and you and I have been scrappy our whole life. We did the singer-songwriter thing, and when you're a do-it-yourself musician, like you have to learn a lot of other things. You have to learn how to market yourself. You have to learn how to fund your recordings, sell your own, singles and CDs. You have to learn how to negotiate, maybe get brand deals, maybe look into licensing. So I think that, there's a lot of projects that I'm working on. I have 2 pilot projects right now, and one is with it's going to be an AI music artist. We're just doing a test case, and I'm going to share it. I'm going to open source it. Anybody can follow along what we're doing. But I got really into the blockchain Web3 space a couple years ago, and for me, what excited me was that there's a way that you can do peer-to-peer transfers of money and transactions. And so for me, I think where the opportunities for artists is to start pulling the way you think about your business away from having to be with all these sub vendors and payment processors and like getting signed to all these other things, and start thinking about yourself as a business and a company, but in the true sense of the word. Like you have your own ecosystem. People can, have tokens in your ecosystem. It's kind of like a form of crypto, but essentially like you can reward your fans by giving them tokens. People can buy in with tokens, and maybe they have shares of a treasury, and your treasury is the music you create, your merch, things like that. So, and this, I know this kind of sounds a little more space age and maybe potentially complicated, but these were all things you couldn't do until blockchain and Web3. You really couldn't. Like you had to, figure out ways to like, sell your merch online and maybe pay for it ahead of time. Or, now there's print on demand, but you're kind of fragmenting everything, right? So what's interesting about blockchain and Web3 is that this concept of peer-to-peer and community really enables, I think, creatives to build the community around their art and around their interests, and to have people become contributors to that ecosystem and then benefit from that ecosystem. So, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, no, not to interrupt, but I remember hearing a lot about this, right, like 3 years ago in the NFT era. And I know there was this company called Royal that was making all the waves with exactly what you're talking about, where people can essentially invest in artists and they are co-owners in parts of their song, which I thought was a fascinating concept. It seemed that kind of all died off once kind of once like NFTs kind of went away and just people lost interest in it, and I really haven't seen much movement with it. But I'm curious, like, is it still focused around blockchain? Is that still a thing? Is there still Web3? Are there even NFTs? People paying attention to that? Like, again, I haven't really heard about or talked to many people that have been discussing this in like 3 years when it was like the hottest thing. But like, yeah, where are we at now with that, and where do you see it heading?
Yeah, so the boom got me into like the boom of NFTs got me into the Web3 space, because at the time I was running, I came in house with my production company with Sound Revolver under the Big Noise Music Group umbrella, and I became their SVP of licensing. I launched a licensing division for them. They got my custom house that was part of their music group. While I was with them, it was still under their music group, but the deal was that if I left, I got to take it back with me, which was really cool. But we had Goldfinger and some really big bands, and we started getting approached by people that wanted to do NFT projects with them. And I just, didn't know enough about it. And so I went to a couple conferences, and it just clicked for me. Now, back in the day, the issue was, and these are called pump and dump schemes, essentially, is that you'd have people, there's a lot of hype around having shares in a thing and getting an NFT. And the royals is a little different, because royals for NFTs is about residuals and royalty and fragmenting and being able to like pay out like or sell shares in your copyright. So I'll put that over there for a second. But NFTs in general, all it is it's an acronym for non-fungible token, and all it is code. It's a smart contract that dictates terms. So what happened back then was that you had a lot of people who promised a lot of what's called utility, meaning if you hold this NFT, you're going to get all these things, and they didn't
front row tickets to their concert or whatever, the actual utility, but then
didn't deliver on those utilities, on the utility for that. So you would have, the benefit of having a smart contract in an NFT is that there's a long tail value to it, right? It's not necessarily just a one-off. It can be, but a lot, really what you're buying into is shares in an ecosystem. And I think what went wrong back then was that everyone saw dollar signs. They got excited. You had CryptoPunks. You were hearing all people making millions and billions. And, everyone got on the forefront of it. And then a lot of people ended up buying these things. And then it's like, I don't know how to describe it, but like when you buy a lot, it drives the price up for the secondary market. And then you had people that would just sell it out. And a lot of the artist teams did that. They would sell it out, and then the price of the NFT would crash. So anyone left holding these NFTs, which were usually fans, were now like, what the fuck? Like,
they lost all their value.
Yes.
Right. I mean, they're digital collectibles, and that's essentially what they were at the core of digital collectibles. And people were trading on the value of them, and they, when the hype was big, like, sure, the value rose and fell a bit, but then eventually it just all crashed and nobody cared about it. And so they were all worth nothing, essentially, because nobody wanted to buy these digital collectibles that they couldn't hold or look at or see, or just lived on this thing and they were numbered, or like, I guess I have the only one and I don't really understand how the blockchain works, but I guess it's traceable. And I similarly, I bought into the hype then too, and I got it and it made sense.
Yes.
I just don't understand where we're like, I have not heard that anyone is doing anything in that space lately. So it's like, I saw, like, I appreciate kind of the transparency of the blockchain and the hope of it all. And like, I loved the concept of bringing fans into the process. That was like, what Kickstarter ushered in way back when, that kind of evolved as to like, okay, not even just part of the process, now co-owning it, which we've seen with like catalog sales, or like royalty exchange has been doing that for years, or sound royalties or whatever, where you can invest in songs, you can sell off shares of your song, but that's in a more like traditional securities realm of our world in the capital markets, instead of blockchain Web3, where it just that kind of been like, that was like the Wild West unregulated area over here. But what are you working on in that
so
space?
I'd say like what I'm trying to solve for is, because I did get into it because this space because I was like, wow, there is a better economic model where we put artists and musicians back in the center of it, instead of, stuck in all these deals. And, and frankly, like the tech companies making most of the money. I mean, you look at what Spotify makes, Pandora makes, you look at all these tech companies, and tech is supposed to make things easier, right? And the technology exists actually to have a lion's share of the money actually go back to the artists. It's just that because of capitalism and because of privatized companies, there's been a lot of gatekeeping, and we've kind of now inherited a world where we're negotiating for splits that don't need to be that way anymore. So what I'm working on is, I have a project called Creative Group, and we're doing a launch pad essentially, and I'm proving out the model, right? So we're taking an artist. I can't announce what the artist is, but it's an AI artist. Now I tried to do this about 2 years ago with a real producer and a real artist. And we kind of came up with the ecosystem play. We came up with the tokens that we'd want to sell, the NFTs, a whole like structure around it. And again, not user friendly back then, like be able to download a wallet, to be able to transfer funds, like really difficult. So I'm attempting it now a few years later, because now you have one click, you have, you know, emails you can sign in with. Like the technology has gotten a lot more user friendly. And you know from being an artist as well, like you don't want to make things hard for your fans. You want to make it really easy for them to participate in the ecosystem. So what we're doing with Creative Group is basically creating a launch pad and an ecosystem around an artist, and with this theory in mind, right? So an artist would have an NFT, they would have their own token that we would launch, they would have their own marketplace. So what we were creating that's different would be, so Ari, anybody, say we created this for you, say you became part of, we did like a launchpad thing for you, and it would be your whole ecosystem. So you'd be able to reward people with your Ari token in terms of when they engage, right? So say you have a street team and someone promotes it, you can airdrop them token for doing that. You can also do what's called token gating, meaning instead of them having to have a physical ticket, they have an NFT that shows that they're certain levels of a fan, and it's all automated. So when someone wants to have access to maybe a private like chat with you, or a group thing that you're doing, or maybe even just your first single being released to only certain fans at a certain level, the technology for this is that you can automate it. And the brilliant part why you would keep most of the funds is because it's direct peer-to-peer. There aren't 8 zillion layers between you and your fans. So, we're basically designing, I would say, more of like how the system would work for rewards. So like it'd be really easy for an artist to kind of, plug and play a few things and say, okay, I can generate my own token, I can regulate my own token, people can spend it, they can buy it. And then if this works out, what the goal would be is that, say, people get RE token in your world, and maybe they get it because there's 3 different levels of participation. There's fans who are just literally show up and listen to your show. There are contributors who are the people that participate in your ecosystem, whether they help you make the podcast or you help you on a record. You would be your own contributor because you're the one creating content. And then there are investors. And you can be any, all, or 3, but investors would just be like, I believe in what Ari is doing. I'm going to just buy shares in this token, or I'm going to buy shares that entitle me to this concept of a treasury, right? So that's it's called Creative Group. And basically, like I said, as we're launching it, we're going to start, we'll have a podcast that we start in the next couple of weeks. We're also going to start emailing out information, and we're going to start doing informational sessions. So like artists can learn about like how they can start to add these income streams for themselves. And then the launchpad itself, the idea is to make it under a foundation. So it's not a for-profit model to the degree where like the Spotifys of the world, essentially we would teach you how to put your own team together. And the idea is that everybody that greenlights this project, you create your own ecosystem and everyone has shares in it.
I love the idea. You mentioned this a couple times, and I haven't asked you, I didn't want to interrupt the flow, but AI music artist, you're starting with this. This is one of the most controversial topics in our industry right now. What do you mean by you're doing this for an AI music artist, and what is an AI music artist?
Yeah, so first of all, I'll say why we picked an AI music artist. So when I did this with my buddy, he was a producer years ago, there were things like he was on tour and busy and couldn't show up for certain things, and like also he had fans and he was worried about alienating them. So we wanted to test the model with a brand new non-human artist so that we could try these different things, and we weren't test dummying like the technology with an artist that all of a sudden something doesn't work and now their fans are pissed because they had no access to that NFT or the airdrop didn't work. So we're proving out the model with an AI artist. Now, when I say AI artist, it means that everything about the artist is AI generated. The image, it'll be like a cartoon character. The music.
Are you the one behind Velvet Sundown? Is that the thing? We've discovered it. We figured it out. All right.
We are not. This is not even a human. This is an animated character. So we're being very transparent that this is like an animated character with music, and actually it's the producer that's behind it. And again, I can't give away too much yet because we haven't released the project, but the producers behind it actually has a ton of awards, and he doesn't just AI generate. He starts with it, but then he pulls it into his rig and he like,
so it's not AI generated music.
It is. It is
AI generated.
It's prompted.
So
yeah.
Okay. And it is, so why, so there's a new project that has no fans. There's no. So how are you gonna launch this with a AI generated artist with AI generated music with no fans?
That's the rollout plan we have right now. So we're probably going to do a radio show for it. We're going to do like, we have Token that we're launching in like the next, like, I mean, it's kind of been pre-released a little bit, but on the DL, and we're going to start rolling out the music tracks for it. It's, the music's going to be great. It's just more, like I said, we want to prove out the model, meaning like, what does it mean to, if you listen or like, you get airdropped a token. If you participate in the merch or this and that, or you could buy in for the token. What do you get? What does that like entitle you to? What access to music do you get? What singles do you get maybe early? So we're using this AI music artist to prove out how like this whole ecosystem would work.
But why use an AI music artist and why not use a real artist? It's just like, it's hard to wrap my head around wanting to, especially as an artist, and you're an artist, like, why you, like, I think we should be, personally, I think we should be doing everything in our power to prevent AI music artists from, like, taking over our industry. Like, don't we want to maintain humanity in the arts? It just seems weird that like, you'd want to promote an AI music art like that. Like, for one, putting like AI music artists are taking over Spotify. Deezer has said that there's like 20% of all the music that is uploaded is AI generative AI music, which then pulls away royalties from the human artist pool, because that's how streaming works. And now people are actually listening, that there's real money that is being generated, that is being diverted away from human artists to these generative AI projects that are soulless, literally soulless. I just don't understand why you would use an AI artist when you have the talent, you have surrounded by talented human artists. Why not just like write the songs yourself, or have your producer write the songs and then create a thing like the Gorillas and do like an animated thing but like the humans are behind.
Yeah.
A real human.
No, I mean, I get it. I think for me, like, we picked an artist that's like, for us, it's more, I'm proving out also, it's not just a music artist, it's a brand. So that's how I want to prove out the model, is I want to show like the merchandise, the games, the comic books, so like I want to show the model in terms of like a creative entity that's not just like one artist that's a singer-songwriter. So it gives us a little bit more flexibility for me to show how this expansion of character would work.
But there's so many, that there's so many emerging indie artists that would kill for some infrastructure and support. And that, like, maybe, your friend, I guess, last year was on tour and couldn't be part of it. But like, oh my God, there's just, I struggle. And it's like, it like physically pains me to know that we are elevating or lifting up or granting legitimacy to generative AI music that's going to just dilute everything we're doing. Because then, like, what's the point? Like, why do, like, I totally get it if it's like, if this is eventually a model for human artists to monetize a fan base.
It is. Yeah.
Well, then start with a human artist, because like, no, but for real, because like, if you build this whole infrastructure, I'm worried of where it eventually goes, because you could build this whole infrastructure. Look, we proved the model for an AI generated entity brand. And then some capitalist is going to come along and be like, well, shit, what do we need humans for? They just proved this. Let's just double this. And so then they're coming along and be like, okay, maybe you have the intention to do this for human artists later on, but someone else is going to come in, just like, Suno is going to come along and be like, fuck it, we're going to do tokens for the fans of Velvet Sundown and all the other AI generated bands or whatever. It's just, I don't understand why you would do an generative AI band and project and all of that instead, when there's so many hardworking bands out there that would just love to be your guinea pig.
Yeah, like I said, we beta tested it a couple of years ago with a living producer, and it was tricky. We used an alias because it was a lot of testing new things, and people were patient, not patient. Fans, when things worked, didn't work, was complicated. And so I think the initial consideration was like, when we promote this, it's like, this is a case study, this is a test case. This is something that's going to be made open source, which means available to anyone that wants to use it. But I, again, like when I was looking at, because you're right, like I have records, I could do the test dummy thing with my own stuff. I have aliases also.
Right.
I think again, the selling point for me was the animated quality, because I do want to show a model for what's called transmedia, which is essentially taking like a character, and there'll be the music element, but there'll also be, and this is what I mean when I say like de-risk, which is, and again, I'm not arguing with you with we can touch the AI, the soullessness part of the AI part first, like, in a second. But I like this idea of being able to kind of in the shorter term, really quickly, like show a transmedia use case, which means like comic books or video games or radio show or like all of these different things, and setting up the lanes for people that might want to go into those various subsets of those business areas. And this, by picking something that's animated, actually has been around forever. Like if you look at Disney and you look at Hasbro and you look at DreamWorks, like, you don't know who the original artists were for those things. You take for granted that there's, you see Mickey or you see trolls. Like you're not like, who drew the trolls? But like
we know they were humans, and we know that theoretically they were compensated fairly for
well, not even though. Like
hopefully.
Disney's a factory. I have friends that have worked on the Lion King series and things like that. And it's like their storyboard, and it's just that IP is owned by that brand. So what I would really love to see, and again, this is my use case, is I think, when you asked what's the evolution for music artists, I think it is like you and your brand, but you and your brand as a creative being. And like, what else can you do? And how do you also, for lack of a better term, how do you de-risk the fact that the only thing you have to sell is your music, right? I mean, that's a terrifying thing in a world where people aren't wanting to pay for music anymore. People are doing subscription services with Spotify. People think music should be free. I don't. I think it should, but your entire model is based off of diminishing returns for your music itself. And this is kind of going back to like my singer-songwriter days, like where I really didn't care about making money. I just wanted to make music and I wanted to relate to people. So how do you find a way to continue to be a creative being, whether it's, with your songs or your poetry or, whatever you're expanding into, and how do you find a way to get your 1,000 fans that are now have a stake in what you have, but maybe it's not so much about selling the single, it's about you're created multiple income streams around you as a creative being.
Yeah, and that makes perfect sense. And I completely agree that, every artist is a full brand. It's a full company. There's so many different avenues you can pursue. And like, a band that I've been into lately, actually, who was on the show, Truesdale, they, 3 women from LA, singer-songwriters, harmonies, they're touring good sized clubs. They put out a great record. I went to their show. They had a comic book. They had a zine that I bought, and it was super cool, and it was animated, and it was put together, and the whole branding is brilliant, and like they have this whole world that they've established. It's not just the single on Spotify. It's like this whole really cool world, and people literally came to the concerts dressed up as them because they kind of created these characters, and each person had a color, and then you go through the comic book, and I get it, like transmedia, but again, what's the end goal here? Like if the case study works for an AI band, that then you get fans listening to this AI music, and there's fans, which is like the most like worrisome thing that I can think of, is that there's genuine human beings that are fans of an AI artist. Like, then what are we doing here?
I mean, I think like, and maybe it's because I'm like, and in my soul, I'm an acoustic singer-songwriter. So like, I look at like, auto-tune on vocals, and like, I mean, I know we're saying AI hasn't been around, but like machine learning and machine programming and splice and dropping in other things and loops. Like I started off recording and producing with real musicians in the studio. And I like remember learning how to play and learning how to mic. I have no mic techniques for live instruments in a studio. And in the last decade or so, like, I think those are always pros and cons, right? Like one of the things that's great about home recording systems and loops are that you have more middle-class musicians than you've ever had. Before you couldn't produce, you had to save up and maybe work 8 jobs and maybe then blow it all on what you hoped would be a good recording session with what you hoped would be the right producer, with what you hoped would be the right musicians. And that's a lot of risk, right? And the con side to all that is all my friends who toured, all of a sudden they're not getting asked to do drum sessions because someone's laying in a drum loop instead of hiring a live drummer. So, I kind of feel that way about, what's happening with AI. Like, you can't replace taste. And I think when you get down to the soullessness of it, like, people resonate with songs that are real and authentic, and they resonate with people who have a story to tell and a genuine connection that needs to be made. So I think what I do think is going to go away in this is the dark part of it, is there have been a lot of, I think, mediocre, maybe for lack of a better term, like, you can make a living maybe being mediocre at a craft you could have before, but now with AI replicating a lot of those things, like, you have to just be better, and you have to just, and better can mean, like, maybe you're not as good of a guitar player as me or you or something else, but you know how to connect with the fan, you know how to write lyrics in a way, or you sing in a certain way. So, like, you have to just really be able, I think, to survive this, to key into the thing that makes you special about what you have to share. If this is about you sharing your music with the world and not just about playing in your bedroom because you enjoy it, if it's about sharing it, you have to really key in on what makes you special and what you can use to connect. And I do think that, like, AI is going to flood the scene, but to your point, I guess I'm more optimistic about it. Like, people are going to, like, people want real stuff, and the people that don't want real stuff have never wanted real stuff. They're looking at manufactured pop stars that have, like, are lip syncing while, I mean, there are a lot of pop stars that don't. I have friends who ghost for major pop stars, and, like, you think you're listening to that artist, you're not. You're listening to my friend who you would never know is 2 kids and, like, shows up in sweats with the ponytail, but they sing, they're doing the vocals and they don't want the credit. They just, they get the paycheck and they're a working vocalist. So I guess it's always kind of been there, Ari, I think. And,
So you're appealing to that audience of fans who are currently, they get into pop music and pop stars as manufactured, and we could even call it soulless if you want, a pop star machinery is. And so you're hoping that instead of them becoming a fan of Tate McRae, they're going to become a fan of your AI artist, and that they will then be a super fan that way too, and spend as much money as they would on a pop star, that they would spend that money and become a fan of an AI artist.
So this is where it gets more fun, is this isn't just about one artist. This is about creating interwoven ecosystems. So I don't want people to just spend money in this AI artist world. I want you to take Ari token and be able to spend it in Jess's ecosystem. I want exchange rates. So my model at phase 1 is, how do we create a valuation of exchange where people are getting and participating and learning, oh, if I do this, I get an airdrop and then I spend it. It's like kind of the mechanics of what does a closed ecosystem look like within an artist treasury, right? But the real phase 2 is what's called providing liquidity between. So now the next artist is, say, Ari, it is you, and you, because DJ Crazy Cat can say, hey, spend my token or engage with Ari and I'll airdrop you token. So that's the phase 2, is like, how do we then create symbiotic ecosystems or collectives of artists that have a value of exchange between their ecosystems?
I don't think I'm going to find a value of exchange with people that are into AI generated music. This is just like what I'm like, I keep coming back to, is just like that audience that it doesn't care about the humanity behind the music. One, I don't think they're going to spend money on an art. I hope not. That would spend money on an artist. It's not, because they're not an artist. That they're it's a bunch of lines of code. They're not even pretending that there's a human behind it. At least, like, as manufactured as I don't mean to pile on her, but like as Tate McRae is, like, she's still a human being. She's still a person. Like, even if she's not even singing, she's dancing, and she's part of the mechanisms. And pop stars has been around since the beginning of the recorded music industry, real or not, and however you define real. There's still humans behind it, making it. There's still songwriters behind it that are writing the songs and theoretically making royalties, being paid from those songs. There's producers that are making the tracks, and sure, there might not be a 50-piece orchestra anymore, but now we're saying, let me hit refresh on Suno, and I've now just generated a song based on a couple keywords, and there's no one behind that, and it's
so
the same
so to
thing.
clarify, actually, behind this artist there is one producer who is brilliant and has worked with tons of artists, and he's the one that's creating the music. He's using a lot of AI generated technology to do it, but there is a producer behind it that's a writer that he will he'll download the stems, he'll redo them, he'll recut, sometimes he'll program in the drums. So it's mostly AI generated, but you wouldn't get what you're getting by just prompting on Suno. Like, we do have, and actually to your point, and I'm really glad we're having this kind of conversation about this, because maybe he does more prominently than step forward the producer. I wasn't sure whether he wanted to or not, but I think if you're right, if there isn't, to maintain a human element of it, this isn't a bunch of suits sitting in a dark room copying and pasting keywords. There's still
not yet.
No, not
but
yes.
It's
but I'm saying with our project for this specific artist, there is a producer who is an incredible producer who's written hits for tons of artists, and he's the one that's doing
Then why? But I still don't understand, why isn't he just making the real music? Why use I don't know. I guess I draw a line between AI tools within a DAW, Auto-Tune or Melodyne, or stacked vocals, or all of that, or splice samples that somebody created that you're using for your production, and typing in some keywords and hitting go, and then it pumping out this music, and then tweaking it a little bit, or then maybe enhancing it. And maybe I'm now the old man. I am not that I don't understand the future of technology, and I'm the ones that when the drum machine came out in the 80s, it's no, you're gonna take money away from drummers.
Yes.
How dare you create a drum machine? I understand.
Yeah.
And maybe these people were having the same conversations around the Napster era, the turn of the century, is we can't move to digital because all sales will go, and we saw that was the case. But it's just but I just I'm really struggling, and I don't think I'm the only one that's just I think we have to draw a hard line. AI is a once in a generation technology, once in a history of humanity, a once in a species technology. This isn't the advent of a drum machine, or the advent of MP3s or whatever. We're literally talking about wiping out human artists, because you can literally type in a couple keywords, hit refresh. And I have a really hard time if anyone in the artist community is elevating that. It just doesn't. I don't get it.
Yeah, I mean, I think the hard part is the shades of gray. Here's a positive use case for it. For example, I worked with a wonderful songwriter community called Songtown. My friend Marty Dodson's an amazing, legendary country songwriter. Clay Mills is his partner in it, and I typically don't do seminars, but I just love their community so much. They really take the time to it's a craft of songwriting. They're writing mostly for cuts, they're writing mostly for artists. And a lot of them, I did a sync seminar with them on and off for a year, and I got to know a lot of the writers really well. And a big barrier to entry for them was the fact that for sync, it had to be broadcast ready, and it had to be broadcast quality. And a lot of these songwriters, in Cuts world, you can kind of get away with a scratch demo, and then maybe if you're lucky, you have a publisher that funds some of those demos for you, or maybe you save up money and you have a deal with a producer. But the ones that were getting the placements were the ones like me that knew how to step behind a rig and at least do a mock-up. And I've had a few reach out to me recently, and with the advent of AI technology, they can realize their vision for their compositions. And I'm always be careful what the terms are, because if you're uploading your lyrics and your melody and maybe just a scratch recording, but for them, now all of a sudden that's not a barrier to entry. This, they are able to get demos over the line to a degree where now an artist can hear it, and they didn't have to look at 50 of their songs and decide which 2 they could afford to produce out. So, that's I think a use case for a lot of the technology. Do I think?
But they still wrote the song.
Yes.
The humans
Correct.
still wrote the song.
Yes.
I get that use case, and I completely understand that. And I know how expensive it is to book musicians in a studio, or even just a producer to make your track, even if they're making it completely in the box. That it's thousands of dollars to do that. I understand that if you're making a demo, that's a great use case. But the idea, I think, eventually is that it was just a tool to help realize that full vision of the song, so then that a human artist would cut that song and then they would actually produce it out with producers and possibly musicians and put that song out. I draw a line from, like, sure, that human artist wrote that song, that's great, they're still a songwriter, versus we've all seen it typing in a few keywords into Suno or Udio, and now, you have the Velvet Sundown, or you have all these literally tens of thousands of other AI bands, AI artists that there was no song behind it. There wasn't. So, like, I get it. And I'm not anti-AI for, like, just argument's sake. Like, I understand there's use cases for it, and that one is a perfect use case that makes sense to me. I just don't know if I'll ever be able to wrap my head around a fully AI artist that is with fully AI generated songs that is pulling money away on streaming services and fandom and fan dollars and all of that away from human artists into AI generated artists. But we're at the very early front, and like, you're thinking about this stuff and in a way that the utility of this coin thing and investors and fans, like, I was totally on board all the way through until you got to, we're testing this with an AI artist, and I'm just like, whoa, why? Like, I don't know. And again, I don't want to, like, we just
wanted to start from zero. And if I think, like, this is a great conversation to have, because, like, where my heart is. Like, I don't want to replace humans. If anything, I'm utilizing technology because I keep saying de-risk. Like, I want to teach people in a very simple way how to be able to be creative and support themselves, for the rest of their lives. Humans, not robots. So yeah. And I will give thought to talking to the producer and seeing if maybe he does want to step a little more forward and is willing to say that he's the one that's done it. Because the reality is, like, you really can't get it to sound the way that he's getting these tracks to sound with AI. He starts with an idea, he pitches and catches, but then he puts it in his rig and he mixes it. Like, there's, this is someone who's perfected his craft. So, he's using it as an extra tool. But I do think, Ari, the fear is real. Like, if you have, I don't know, like I said, I've seen this done so many ways. I've seen producers that have intern factories and they're cranking on songs, and maybe the person that's the main producer is only putting out 3 records a year, but under his umbrella, there's 50, records a year. So
you're right. I know the technology's here, and I get it. You're right. It's like, ethically, where do we draw the lines? Is it ethical of that producer, with unpaid interns, actually ghost writing, ghost creating all of this music? No, I don't think that's ethical. But like, I think it's on a case by case basis, and it's I see the utility and use case for how people can use AI. I mean, hell, I use ChatGPT to write a band bio. Yeah. It's like, okay, I just took a job away from an actual journalist that I would normally pay $500 to write a band bio, and ChatGPT did it in 30 seconds, and it's a brilliant bio that I've put on Spotify about a real artist. But, where do we draw the line? What is ethical? Which jobs are we willing to get rid of, and which ones do we want to keep? So we could go on for hours and hours and hours. I want to call it there. But it's, I think we do need to be having these conversations. I think it's really important to challenge, and I think everybody listening, there are going to be people on all sides of this, and understanding that it's hard to draw a hard line in the sand saying this side over here is okay and this side over here is not, because we don't really know where and how to draw those lines right now, because AI is now integrated into the entire workflow from creation to marketing and everything in between. You can't get away from it. So it is like, we're going to have to understand and create, like, and think about this. But I think it is our responsibility as artists, but also business owners and people creating new technologies. It's like, okay, yes, we can do this, but should we? And what is the purpose of what we're doing? And I think just in general, too many technologists, too many, Silicon Valley people get so caught up in the can we do it?
Yeah.
They never ask should we?
They rarely ask.
Or why are we
They
doing
rarely
this?
ask.
They
Should
rarely
we?
ask.
They're
Should
seeing
we?
if we can.
No.
I think actually a really interesting conversation that leaves us on like a bit of a positive note, if I may, would be, I'm curious as to how we have, like, you would have handmade, right? Not made. Think about like the clothing industry, right? You used to have people that were dressmakers, or they'd sew things, or artisans and crafts. And now, things are affordable, but most of them are made by, machines and soon robots. And so like handmade, handcrafted still has value.
Yeah.
And I would like to see us as a community figure out the minimum burden of proof that if someone really wants to support human-made music, again, it's sad we're having this conversation. We watched all the sci-fi movies growing up, but we are here, right? Yeah. So I think, and I've been thinking about that too with this artist that we're releasing and how much the producer is involved. Like, can we use this as an example of saying, like, did what he do, is what he did enough to have it be human-made and AI-assisted, or is it purely an AI artist? So like, and again, bringing up the songwriter example that I gave where they're using prompts, but they maybe did the guitar or the vocals or the lyrics. Like, I think we really need to come together as a community and figure out like how to get that stamp, like how to say like the minimum burden of humanity created proof is what. So no one's agreeing on that yet, but I do think that that's
totally
maybe the best we can do at this point is really draw a hard line when it comes to some sort of like, and again, you think like organic stamps on things we now know doesn't mean very much in certain instances. So labeling is inherently a flawed system.
Fair trade music.
Exactly.
Right?
No, but yes, but that would be something like I would love to start to figure out how to thread with this project and just in general with the communities that you and I run between. Like, what is the thing? There's something that's signed because I was looking in a coloring book company that I almost invested in, and what I loved about it was that they signed, I forget, it's this global artist accordance or something where they promised to always use human illustrators and not AI. And so it's a pledge, but there was going around a pledge, some sort of thing. So I don't know. I would like to, again, come together as a community and figure out how we can give visibility to people that are still approaching this craft in a way that is a little more heavy lifting with humanity.
I love that. That's a great idea. I think we should have a human-made label, and I think the streaming services should pop some kind of visibility. I like if it's like AI. At least now, it's like this is AI made or something like that. And granted, it is really hard to do that detection purposes, but also because everybody's using AI in some capacity. And it's like on one end is it just for tuning the vocals a little bit, or is it on the other end of using Suno to literally type 3 words and pump out a fully realized track with the whole thing? Where's the line? And nobody knows right now, but I think it's a great conversation that we're having. I appreciate your thoughts on that, and I appreciate you sparring with me all about this because it's stuff that we need to, we need to get it out in the open. Yeah. So cool. Well, Jess, thank you so much. I have one final question that I ask everyone who comes on the show, and that is, what does it mean to you to make it in the new music business?
I think what it means to me to make it, it's just to keep that joy and wonderment and excitement about connecting with my creativity. It's to remember why I picked up a guitar when I was a little kid. It's to remember, I don't know, that exchange that I have when I create something and someone relates to it. So I think for me, regardless of where this industry evolves, it's making it to me is not losing sight of that genuine joy and wonderment over creating something that connects you to other people.
Jess Furman, thank you so much. That was great. Love it. This episode was edited by Peter Schrupp with music by Brassroots District and produced by all the great people at Ari's Take.